Le passé composé or l'imparfait? That is the question for today. Welcome back to French Action, and my name is Jenny. I had to stay longer at Charela Inn, so follow me and let's find out. C'est parti! J'ai prolongé mon séjour de 2 jours pour être avec une amie. J'ai dû changer de chambre pour avoir 2 lits. I extended my stay by 2 days to be with a friend. I had to change rooms to get 2 beds. Here, as you can see, there's 2 verbs in red. Red will be used for the passé composé. Those 2 verbs had to be in the passé composé because both actions happened once. And also, they are the result, or shall I say consequences. I extended my stay because I wanted to be with a friend, and I had to change rooms because I extended my stay. So these are consequences, and therefore you will need to use the passé composé. L'hôtel était complet, donc je n'ai pas pu obtenir de chambre avec vue sur la mer. The hotel was full. Complet is full when referring to a hotel. Donc, which is therefore, I was not able to get a room with a sea view. Okay, so here I have put 2 colors. You need to remember that the blue is for the imperfect and the red for the passé composé. L'hôtel était complet, so we are just saying that it was full. Description, remember with to be, we tend to use the imperfect. It's not really an action as such, it's a state. So we are going to use the imperfect here. And then from the imperfect, interestingly, we have a different tense in the same sentence, which is the passé composé. Now, the passé composé is there because we have donc, therefore, as a result, the hotel was full. As a result, I didn't get a room with a sea view. So remember, consequence, you need to use the passé composé. Cette chambre avait un balcon qui donnait cette fois sur la piscine. So the translation would be something like, this room had a balcony which, this time, gave onto the swimming pool. This is with reference to my previous room, which was overlooking the sea. So here you can see, because it's in blue, we have the imperfect, and it is normal to have the imperfect here because it is a description. We're describing the fact that the room has a balcony, or had a balcony, and where it was located. If you remember my previous video, location is one of them, and description. So description, I would say, is the main reason here for having the imperfect. Mon ami et moi, nous baignions rarement à la piscine car nous préférions la mer. My friend and I rarely had a swim in the swimming pool because we preferred the sea. So our 2 verbs are in blue, meaning in the imperfect tense. We have nous baignions. Nous baignons is the imperfect of se baigner, which is a reflexive verb, which explains why we have the nous. which is the reflexive pronoun. Se baigner means really to bathe, but we cannot talk about to bathe in a swimming pool. So we would say to have a swim. Okay, so the context is going to give you a different translation. And for the second verb, we have préférer, which is to prefer, in the imperfect as well. And those two verbs are in the imperfect because we are referring to habits in the past. Préférer as well here, you could say, well, it's not really a habit, but it's not as if we preferred yesterday and the following day. We didn't. It was continuously, so to speak, preferring the sea. Okay? Hence the use of the imperfect in this sentence. Un matin, pendant que nous faisions la grasse matinée, le personnel de l'hôtel préparait un bel événement. J'ai appris que c'était un mariage. One morning, while we were having a long lie in bed, the hotel employees were preparing for a nice event. I found out that it was a wedding. So here we have a mixture of the imperfect and the passé composé. One morning, while. The while is really the key word here. If you have pendant que, you know that you're going to have to use the imperfect tense, because it means while something was going on, and even in English, we would use was or were plus the verb ending with the ing. So while something was happening, something else was going on. So we have two actions going on at the same time. So when you are in such a situation, you have to use the imperfect. So that's the reason why we have the imperfect twice in this sentence. Then you have j'ai appris, which is the passé composé of apprendre. J'ai appris, I learned. Okay, I translated it as I found out more than I learned, but it's really I learned that it was a wedding. Suddenly, okay, suddenly I found out. It's not that I was learning that it was a wedding. I suddenly found out that it was a wedding, and we know that it was is c'était. And that's the reason why we have the passé composé here. It's just one action completed, done. Un soir, j'ai invité mon amie à manger des escargots au Vendôme, le restaurant de l'hôtel. Elle ne connaissait pas ce plat, mais elle a bien aimé. C'était délicieux. Je me suis bien régalée. One evening, I invited my friend to eat snails at the Vendôme, the hotel restaurant. She didn't know this dish, but she liked it. It was delicious. I really enjoyed it. So here we have a mixture of passé composé in red and imperfect in blue. The first two words, un soir, really sets the scene where we know that it's a specific event. I invited, it's not I was inviting my friend, it's a one completed action which took place once. And what did I do? I invited her to eat snails. While snails is because Vendôme is a restaurant in the hotel, and for those who watch my video, my previous video, I explained that it was a Franco-Jamaican hotel. So they do offer quite a few French stuffs, very nice dishes. And at Christmas, I understand that they have foie gras. So, you know, it's very exciting to know that you can eat foie gras in Jamaica at Christmas. Anyway, so then, elle ne connaissait pas ce plat. She didn't know this dish. Connaître is an action which is most of the time ongoing. It's not like you know something today and you don't know it tomorrow. So she didn't know that dish. Okay. So we're going to use the imperfect because it's like an ongoing thing. She didn't know. As I said, not yesterday, not tomorrow. It will be the fact that she didn't know the dish. But, and then you have this little but, she liked it. Here, we're going to have the passé composé because we're only referring to the snails, nothing else. And we ate the snails, one action, she liked it. Bang. C'était délicieux. Here again, we have our c'était, so we know now that it's the imperfect. Je me suis bien régalée. This is a consequence as well, a bit like elle a bien aimé. We ate snails, one of action, we liked it. That's it, completed. Il faisait beau quand nous avons décidé de faire de la paravoile. Nous avions très peur, mais nous crions et nous rions. On voyait tout. On avait une belle vue des hôtels et de la plage de Negril. The weather was nice when we decided to go parasailing. We were very scared, but we shouted and laughed. We could see everything. We had a beautiful view of the hotels and the beach in Negril. So here again, we have a little mixture, not much of a mixture because we only have one passé composé, but that one passé composé is really our action, our completed action. We decided. When you decide is one thing, one off, happening once. Il faisait beau is really the description of the weather. Nous avions très peur. You remember its emotions. Nous crions et nous rions. It was a continuous thing happening in the air. It was a habit, not a habit, a repetition. It's not that we shouted once and we laughed once. It was done several times. So we're going to use the imperfect to reflect that repetition. On voyait tout. We could see everything. Okay? So we could see everything is really a continuity because we were in the air for a while and continuously we could see everything. And on avait is from to have, and you know that avait is a state as well, so we are going to have the imperfect one more time. Le soleil se couchait quand nous sommes partis. Nous avons passé un excellent séjour. Mon ami a découvert les croissants au petit déjeuner et les escargots. Moi, je me suis bien reposée. It was sunset when we left. We had an excellent stay. My friend discovered croissant for breakfast and snails. As for me, I had a good rest. So here we have a mixture, but not so much of a mixture. But this time, instead of having more of the imperfect, we are going to have more of the passé composé and just one imperfect. So you have to imagine the sun going down. So something was happening. It was going down. Okay. When bang, we left. It was one action, done, finished, and happened once. And then the rest, everything else, is in the passé composé because I'm just giving a feedback on what happened. we had a good stay, my friend discovered croissant, I enjoyed myself. Now, when you're going to give a series of actions as a feedback, you need to use the passé composé. I hope that the texts illustrated well the use of the passé composé and the imperfect, and I hope that you have understood. Let's go through a final recap. So, you would use the passé composé for completed actions. Those completed actions for me are bang actions. When it's completed, you know when it started and you know when it finished. It's a bang action. Take it that way. Bang action. As opposed to the imperfect, where it would be incomplete actions because we are talking about ongoing actions. While something was going on, something else was happening, we don't know when those actions actually were completed. So that's really the difference between the passé composé and the imperfect. A bang action and a stretch action. So as an example, I have j'ai invité mon ami. I invited my friend, I did it once, and that was it. Bang action. Whereas with the imperfect, l'imparfait, you remember that sentence? Pendant que nous faisions la grasse matinée, le personnel de l'hôtel préparait un bel événement. Two actions were happening. We don't know when it really ended. In addition to the bang action, it's also a one-off action. It means that it's happened once, as opposed to the imperfect, where it's repeated actions. Specific actions in the passé composé. And sometimes we have the words like one day, bang, something happened. Whereas with the imperfect, we're talking about daily routine, habitual actions, and probably your childhood, what you used to do when you were little. I have tried to show a little diagram here, especially for those who are very visual. The passé composé actions that started and ended, so I just put a little arrow there to show you that it is actions which are punctual actions. We know it happened once, done, finish, bang actions. As opposed to the imperfect, where we can see the three arrows to show repetitions. Okay, it's the same actions repeated, and ongoing action, for example here, so I extended it a little bit so that you can see that it's not always the same. I mean, the arrows are not always the same size. Some are smaller, and this one is the ongoing action one is bigger. Whereas with the passé composé, I put the three arrows with the same size, so that you can see that this is completed, done. And with the imperfect, we don't always know when the action actually ended. I hope that you'll find this helpful. Okay, so here I'm hoping that you can remember this. For the passé composé, I'm suggesting acts and facts. Acts really stands for the actions, completed actions. And also when you talk about facts in the past, is the use of the passé composé. As opposed to in the imperfect, you have all these words ending with sion, situations, impressions, descriptions, emotions. Look at on the side SIDE to see if you can remember this, okay? Situations, impressions, descriptions, and emotions. And also here, you can see that when we use the imperfect, there's a little bit of subjectivity here. We're talking about emotions, okay, impressions, even descriptions. So I would say this is the main difference between the two tenses. So remember, actions, bang actions. And if it's not a bang action, then it's obviously an imperfect action. It's important to remember the translation. Okay, for the passé composé, we have two forms. So if we were to use the verb to do, you would have did and has done in the passé composé, whereas you have four versions for the imperfect. You have did, was doing, was or were doing, would do for a habit in the past, or used to do, especially if you're talking about your childhood. So be careful. I have put some words in the passé composé box as well as in the imperfect one to show you some words which would attract the tense. So for example, for the passé composé, whenever you see soudain, you're more likely to have to use the passé composé because it's sudden, like tout à coup, which means all of a sudden. You know that it's going to be a bang action. And remember what we talk about the consequence, alors or donc, which means therefore or so for alors, then you know you're going to have to use the passé composé. Whereas with the imperfect, you have autrefois, for example, formerly, in the old days, d'habitude, which is usually, le lundi, le soir, on Mondays, in the evening. This again is habit. De temps en temps, from time to time. And I could I could obviously continue with the list, but I don't really have a lot of space here. But the word like souvent, which is often, could be added to that list. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that some verbs can have the same pronunciation, like in the present and the imperfect. However, there will be a difference in the writing. So for the imperfect of rire, for example, even though we have riant, we have to add this extra I so that it's clear that we are using the imperfect as opposed to the present. And here, je fais, which is the present tense of faire, I'm using this because I've noticed that some students think that the imperfect of faire is fait, AIS, because it has the same ending, but that's not the case at all. You have to remember that the imperfect of faire has two syllables, faisait. And this is also another mistake I often see. For the imperfect, many times I see an R, which is not supposed to be there. Because when you put an R, you are in a different tense. You are in the conditional tense, because the conditional tense has exactly the same endings of the imperfect. But what is different is the stem. So you have to be very careful not to put any R's in the imperfect. If you have an R in the middle of the word just before the AIS, you know that you're in the conditional. So let's see if you got it. So I'm going to give you a little exercise. Vous êtes prêts? C'est parti. I've written a little text for you, and the verbs which are in brackets obviously have to be changed into either the imperfect or the passé composé, depending on the sentence. Okay? So, un jour, Monsieur Raymond se baignait à la mer quand il se mettre à se noyer. Se noyer means to drown. Quelqu'un remarquait qu'il avoir des difficultés et plonger dans l'eau pour le sauver. Plonger means to dive. Sauver means to save him. Pendant que ce dernier nageait, ce dernier is referring to the person, the latter. Il se trouvait lui-même en difficulté. The second part, les gens sur la plage regardaient la scène avec émotion. Les gens ne pas comprendre car Monsieur Raymond prendre un bain de mer tous les matins et il savoir bien nager. So this is the little exercise I'm asking you to do now. I'm going to put back the text again and then you will have to stop or pause the video so that you have time to write your answers. And after that, of course, as usual, you will see my answers. Voici les réponses. Un jour, Monsieur Raymond se baignait à la mer quand il s'est mis à se noyer. Here, it's a little trap because you remember that I said un jour. Very often when we talk about un jour, we are going to use the passé composé because it's a specific event. However, here, it's not a specific event because we have found out that he was going to the sea all the time. So you have to be very, very careful. So, Monsieur Raymond se baignait à la mer quand, when. When, bang action, something happened. He started to get drowned, okay? He was drowning, so il s'est mis, se mettre means to start. It's not he was starting, is bang, started. Quelqu'un a remarqué, as a consequence, so we're going to use the passé composé. Quelqu'un, someone, noticed, and what did they notice? That he had difficulties, or he was in difficulties. So here we're going to use the imperfect. You remember what I said? Have, with have, more likely to use the imperfect. It's a state. Et a plongé dans l'eau pour le sauver. So the person noticed Monsieur Raymond and dived, and he dived once, okay, for this specific event, et a plongé dans l'eau pour le sauver. Pendant que, while. So when you have while, it means something was ongoing, okay? Pendant que ce dernier nageait, and remember to have the E there, otherwise you will be saying naguait, okay? Donc pendant que ce dernier nageait, il s'est trouvé lui-même en difficulté. He found himself in difficulty. So it's whilst whilst he was swimming, suddenly he realized there was a problem. So that's why I put il s'est trouvé, which is the passé composé. Les gens sur la plage regardaient la scène. They were looking, they were watching the scene with emotion. Okay, so when you have were watching, that one is simpler because you know that is going to be the imperfect. Les gens ne comprenaient pas, so they could not understand. Okay, so that was ongoing, you know. They could not understand because, car is because, has nothing to do with the car. It's because Monsieur Raymond prenait un bain de mer tous les matins, because Monsieur Raymond had the habit of going for a swim in the sea. So because it's a habit, we have to use the imperfect. Okay? Donc, prenez un bain de mer tous les matins, and you know that because you have tous les matins every morning. Et il savait bien nager. And he could swim well. Okay? Here is could swim for can, the can in the past. We have to use savoir. He knew how to swim. Okay? And this is ongoing. It's not something you know Monday and Tuesday, you don't know it. So it's ongoing, so you're going to be using the imperfect. I hope you have understood the use of these two tenses. I know it's not really easy. Here are other videos you can watch. You have the one on the imperfect tense. You can brush up on your passé composé with avoir and être. Well, if you enjoyed the video, please show it by liking it, sharing it. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe. Au revoir. À bientôt.